understand and apply risk management concepts. Welcome to this module on risk management concepts. Risk management is a fundamental part of cybersecurity because organizations face threats every day. In this lesson, we will learn how to identify risks, assess their impact, and determine the best way to manage them. We'll also cover risk response strategies, different types of security controls, and why continuous monitoring is essential. Let's get started. Risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and reducing security risks to an acceptable level. The goal is not to eliminate all risks, because that's impossible, but to manage them in a way that aligns with the organization's business goals. Before we go further, let's talk about some key terms in risk management. These are risk, threat, vulnerability, and impact. Let's go over what they mean. Risk. The potential for loss or damage when a threat exploits a vulnerability. Threat. Anything that can cause harm, such as hackers, malware, or natural disasters. Vulnerability. A weakness in a system that can be exploited by a threat. Impact. The consequences of a security breach, such as financial loss, reputational damage, or legal penalties. Now here's an example. Imagine a company that stores sensitive customer data in an unencrypted database. The fact that the data is not encrypted is a vulnerability. If a hacker gains access to the database, this becomes a threat. The financial and legal damage that results from this attack is the impact, and the overall combination of these factors is the risk. So how do we manage risk effectively? Here are some best practices that organizations should follow. Identify threats before they become incidents. Regularly assess vulnerabilities in systems and processes. Implement security controls to minimize risk. Continuously monitor systems to detect new risks. Now that we understand what risk is, let's talk about how organizations assess and analyze risks. Risk analysis helps organizations measure risk, and there are two ways to do this: qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. Let's go over them. Qualitative risk analysis uses subjective methods like expert judgment to prioritize risks based on likelihood and impact. Quantitative risk analysis uses numerical values to calculate financial losses associated with risks, e.g. expected annual loss. Here's an example. A cybersecurity team conducts a qualitative risk assessment and identifies ransomware as a top threat based on expert opinions. Then they perform a quantitative risk assessment to estimate the potential financial loss if a ransomware attack were to occur. Here are some best practices for conducting effective risk assessments. Use risk matrices to rank threats from low to critical. Document risks in a risk register for ongoing monitoring. Assess risks at regular intervals as threats evolve. Once risks are identified and analyzed, organizations must decide how to handle them. There are 4 main risk response strategies. Let's go over them. Risk avoidance, eliminating the risk entirely by not engaging in the risky activity. Risk mitigation, reducing the risk by implementing security controls. Risk transfer, shifting risk to another party, such as purchasing cybersecurity insurance. Risk acceptance, acknowledging the risk but not taking action if it falls within acceptable limits. Here's an example. A company decides to mitigate risk by implementing multi-factor authentication to protect against password theft. However, they accept the risk of minor website downtime since it has minimal impact on operations. Here are the best practices when it comes to managing risk responses. Choose a risk response strategy based on business needs. Regularly review risks and update risk treatment plans. Use insurance for financial risk transfers when appropriate. To mitigate risks, organizations implement security controls. These are measures designed to prevent, detect, respond to threats. Let's go over the 3 main types. Preventive controls stop security incidents before they happen. Examples: firewalls, multi-factor authentication, MFA. Detective controls identify security breaches and suspicious activities. Examples: intrusion detection systems, IDS security logs. Corrective controls restore systems and fix vulnerabilities after an incident. Examples: patching software, backups. Here's an example. A company uses a preventive control by blocking unauthorized USB devices. If an employee tries to insert a USB, a detective control logs the attempt, and a corrective control disables USB ports after multiple failed attempts. Here are some best practices when implementing security controls. Use a layered security approach, defense in depth. Regularly test controls to ensure effectiveness. Implement automatic updates and patches to address vulnerabilities. Risk management is not a one-time process. Organizations must continuously monitor security threats and update their risk assessments. Let's talk about how they do this. Security Information and Event Management, SIEM. Centralized logging of security events to detect threats. Penetration testing and vulnerability scanning. Regularly testing security defenses. Security audits. Assessing compliance with security policies and industry standards. Incident reporting. Documenting and analyzing past security events to improve future responses. Here's an example. A company uses a SIM system to monitor network activity. When an employee logs in from an unusual location, the system flags it as a potential threat, triggering an investigation. Here are some best practices for continuous risk monitoring. Implement real-time security monitoring for early threat detection. Conduct monthly security assessments to review controls. Establish a clear risk reporting structure for executives and stakeholders. Now, let's summarize what we've learned about risk management concepts. Risk is the combination of threats, vulnerabilities, and impact. Risk analysis can be qualitative, expert judgment, or quantitative, financial loss estimation. Organizations can avoid, mitigate, transfer, or accept risks. Security controls are categorized into preventive, detective, and corrective measures. Continuous monitoring and reporting ensure security controls remain effective. By applying these risk management concepts, organizations can effectively protect their assets while aligning security efforts with business goals. This concludes our module on risk management. Up next, threat modeling concepts. Stay secure.